The Second World War began on September 1, 1939. Historians in many countries around the world have proven that the USSR and Germany are equally responsible for launching this war. However, Soviet historians remained silent for 50 years about the fact that in 1939, Stalin coordinated his actions with Hitler. The Soviet-German War, within the framework of the Second World War, was replaced by the term Great Patriotic War. What ideological context do these myths have? What actually happened in 1939 and the following years? This poses the question, why weren't the aggressive actions of the USSR against Poland and Finland, the annexation of the Baltic states, war crimes and crimes against humanity properly evaluated by the International Court in Nuremberg? The Second World War, which is how the Great Opposition of over 60 countries referred to in the world, started on September 1, 1939, with the invasion of the Third Reich Army on Poland. On September 17th, the USSR troops invaded Poland. Local military conflicts within the Second World War have their own names in many countries. In English-speaking countries, the war with the USSR is replaced by the term Eastern Front of World War II. In German historiography, it is the German-Soviet War, the Russian campaign or the Eastern campaign. Be that as it may, nowhere except in the Soviet Union did the name of one part of the war replace the name of the whole war. So according to historians, the main reason the Soviet leadership created its own historiography was the fact that the Soviet Union became an ally of Nazi Germany in August 1939. The first agreement between the Weimar Republic of Germany and the Soviet Union was signed in Rapallo in 1922. The relationship had been maintained for decades, but the fact is that Hitler's rise to power briefly interrupted such relations. Later, the common aspirations of the two dictators to reconsider the outcome of World War I were to put them on one side of the barricades. On August 23, 1939, a non-aggression treaty known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed in Moscow. A secret protocol was added to it, according to which the two totalitarian states secretly divided their spheres of influence in Eastern Europe. The main sphere of interest of the Soviet Union included control over ethnic Ukrainian territories, which had been part of Poland following the 1921 Treaty of Riga. Pro-Kremlin historians typically claim that it was a forced measure that was supposed to delay the outbreak of World War II. In reality, the treaty between the Soviet Union and Germany was the impetus that sparked the start of World War II, as it gave Hitler the opportunity to invade Poland and start his military campaign against other Western European countries. The USSR and Germany acted as allies in the war against Poland. They jointly coordinated air raids, disarmed Polish units, conceded seized territories to each other, and even held a joint military parade in Brest. After August 23, 1939, the cooperation between the Communists and the Nazis lasted for almost 22 months over the period of 1939 to 1941. On December 23, 1939, the Pravda newspaper published telegrams of Hitler and Ribbentrop in which they cordially congratulated Stalin on his 60th birthday. The reply of Stalin was, "The friendship between the people of Germany and the Soviet Union, bonded in blood, has every reason to be long and strong."
In the
first phase of World War II, the Soviet Union fought side by side with Nazi Germany. It supported them from the east, while German troops were fighting in the west. In this way, they divided Central and Eastern Europe between themselves. They annexed Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. They split Poland in half with the Nazis. In addition to that, they stripped Bessarabia from Romania and the Vyborg Bay from Finland.
У Румунії, острова Виборгський перешеек у Фінляндії.
The invasion of Germany on June 22, 1941, made the Soviet Union a victim. Prior to that, the whole world viewed the Kremlin as an aggressor and an ally of the Third Reich in starting the World War.
Нужно было как-то прикрыть вот эту темную сторону.
They needed to cover up the dark side somehow at the beginning of the war. After Nazi Germany's preemptive strike on the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, the USSR ended up in the same trench and on the same front line as Britain, occupied France, the torn-up Poland, and the United States of America.
С разорванной Польшей, Соединенными Штатами Америки, как можно было...
How could they explain to themselves and their Western allies this policy of appeasing the Nazi aggressor and the territorial division of Central and Eastern Europe with the aggressor? They simply removed this information from public access and focused on what benefited the government.
Изъял ту информацию из общего доступа и акцентировал...
In short, it was the heroism of the soldiers and commanders of the Red Army, the repression of the occupying power against the civilian population, and the indisputable contribution that the Soviet people made to the victory over Nazi Germany.
Вкладе, который сделал советский народ в победу над нацистской Германией.
Further on, in order to justify the illegality of the non-aggression treaty, the Soviet propaganda created a number of myths. One of them claimed that the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact gave the USSR the necessary respite before the start of the war.
Нельзя сказать, что какую-то отсрочку Советский Союз...
We cannot say that the Soviet Union had no reprieve. Another thing is that the Soviet Union was one of the main initiators of the war. It did not need the delay to gather courage to fight the German military machine. It needed it to choose a convenient time to attack the Germans on its own. But the historical fact is that only certain coincidences allowed Hitler to strike the enemy first.
Гитлеру ударить первым.
Soviet historiography supported the myth that the Soviet Union had not been preparing for possible warfare until the early 1940s, for a fairly long time. However, in 1941, the USSR was the most militarized state in the world at that time. Documents of the Soviet leadership dating back to 1940 to 1941 indicate that all strategic plans for the war with Germany envisioned only an offensive war.
Только когда мог быть произведен вот этот удар под видом освободительного...
But when the strike occurred, that was disguised as a liberation campaign to the West is debatable. However, the fact that the Soviet Union was preparing for an active offensive war is indisputable.
Причем активной и наступательной, это бесспорно. Взять хотя бы...
Take, for example, the inability of the Red Army, its generals, its senior command staff, let alone the lower and middle command units, to carry out defensive actions. The troops were not trained for that. They were trained to attack. All of this propaganda was especially aimed at an active offensive on enemy territory.
Активную наступательную войну на чужой территории, на вражеской территории.
Stalin was very afraid that after the end of World War II, the issue of his responsibility for participation in starting the war could have been raised. Right after the war ended, a special body was created under Stalin's orders. It had different names in various documents: Government Committee on the Nuremberg Process, Government Committee on the Organization of the Nuremberg Trials, Committee on Managing the Nuremberg Trials. Stalin appointed Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Vyshinsky, the head of this top-secret committee with special functions. The main purpose of the committee was to prevent any discussion of any aspect of Soviet-German relations in 1939 to 1941, under any circumstances. Primarily, this was about the very fact of the existence and especially the contents of the so-called secret protocols that supplemented the Non-Aggression Pact of August 23, 1939, and the Friendship Treaty of September 28, 1939.
Главным обвинителем от Советского Союза был генеральный прокурор Советской Украины, многолетний Николай Руденко. Так вот,
the main accuser from the Soviet Union was the Prosecutor General of Soviet Ukraine Mykola Rudenko. Before leaving for Nuremberg, Deputy Commissar for Foreign Affairs of the Soviet Union, former prosecutor of the late 1930s Andrei Vyshinsky, informed Rudenko about the issues which were not to be raised at the trials. They could not be raised by the lawyers of the leaders of the Third Reich. nor by the American, British, and French allies.
Американским, британским,
In
французским.
that list of issues, there were also the 1939 Soviet-German Non-Aggression Treaty and the Friendship and Borders Treaty.
1939
In addition to that, there were their secret protocols, the issues of the western border of the Soviet Union, the issues of territorial claims of the Turkish Republic, the issues of the Black Sea Straits, and so on.
Черноморских проливов и так далее и тому подобное.
Stalin did everything possible to prevent the discussion of the role of the USSR in starting World War II at the Nuremberg trials, and he succeeded as the position of the winner allowed him to dictate the conditions. On November 26, 1945, Vyshinsky's committee decided to approve the list of issues that could not be discussed in court. There were 9 of them. The first item was the secret protocol of the Soviet-German Non-Aggression Treaty and everything related to it. The last item concerned Western Ukraine and Western Belarus together with the issues in Soviet-Polish relations. The defendants' separate attempts to point out the true role of the USSR in the preparation of World War II did not change the overall situation. For example, below are the last words of Ribbentrop. Quote, "When I arrived in Moscow in 1939 to Marshal Stalin, we did not discuss the possibility of a peaceful settlement of the German-Polish conflict. Instead, he made it clear that in the event that he did not receive half of Poland and the Baltic state, then I could immediately fly back. Clearly, waging war was not considered a crime against peace in 1939. This paragraph was not included in the Russian edition of the Nuremberg trials. The truth about the days leading to the war was ordered to be forgotten. Forgotten in the truest sense of the word, as Stalin forbade writing diaries and memoirs about the war. Violating the ban could cost a person their life. All the important documents that can shed light on this case are still classified. Whenever possible, Stalin tried not to leave any traces behind. No shorthand notes of meetings were preserved. Taking advantage of his unlimited power, Stalin gave most of the so-called key orders and assignments verbally.
Особенностью сталинского стиля руководства и вообще тоталитарных режимов есть то, что ключевые, кардинальные такие
The
основополагающие
unique feature of the Stalinist style of leadership and all totalitarian regimes is that they were able to not document all the key moments of domestic and foreign policy.
постановление Совнаркома Советского Союза о проведении Голодомора, без изъятии всего продовольства с территории.
Was there a resolution of the Soviet People's Commissar on carrying out the Holodomor and expropriating all food in Ukraine? Of course not. Such things were not documented. Naturally, under a totalitarian regime, the issues that were discussed verbally and the decisions made based on those discussions were subject to mandatory execution. It is not a democracy that envisions documenting all decisions and making them public.
Формализацию всех решений в документальном виде. И
After all, a totalitarian regime does not necessarily have to leave any traces behind. This was exactly the case in the People's Republic of China under Mao Zedong's rule. This was the case in Nazi Germany, and this was the case in the Soviet Union under Stalin.
в нацистской Германии, так было и в Сталинском Советском Союзе.
The recklessness and impunity of the USSR's actions in starting World War II allowed it to falsify history and create myths that still exist in collective memory. According to scholars, the term Great Patriotic War is unacceptable for Ukraine because its participation in the Second World War was not limited to the period of confrontation between the USSR and Germany in the years 1941 to 1945. This war affected Ukraine since September 2nd, 1939 to the last day of World War II on September 2nd, 1945. Ukrainian soldiers fought on almost all of its fronts in the armed forces of not just the USSR, but also Poland, Canada, the United States, and other UN countries.